The great station hung in the empty space between stars, a massive ring of metal and light that served as neutral ground for the most powerful species in the galaxy. 7 flags flew in the main chamber, each one representing a civilization that had conquered worlds and built empires across the stars. The Conclave of 7 had gathered here to discuss the future of the Orion Spur, a region rich with minerals and planets ready for harvest. Ambassador Velkith of the Dominion stood at the central podium, his scaled skin catching the artificial light as he addressed the assembled representatives. His voice was smooth and confident, the voice of someone who had never known defeat. "My fellow members of the Conclave," he began, spreading his forearms wide in a gesture of welcome. "We gathered today to discuss the division of territories in the Orion Spur, and I believe we should address one matter first." He touched a control panel, and a holographic image appeared above the chamber. It showed a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. "Earth," Velkith announced, and several delegates made sounds of disgust or amusement. "The third planet of the Sol system, home to a species called humans," a representative from the hegemony, a tall insectoid creature named High Commander Yaravel, clicked her mandibles in what passed for laughter among her kind. "The primitives," she said, her translator giving her words a harsh mechanical tone. "I have seen the reports on these creatures. They have not even achieved faster than light travel." "Exactly," Velkith agreed, his thin lips curling into a smile. "Which is why I propose we settle the matter of their system now, before we discuss the more valuable territories." The Dominion ambassador pulled up more data, showing images of human cities and human technology to the gathered aliens. It all looked painfully simple. "They still burn fossil fuels for energy," Velkith explained. "They fight wars among themselves over resources and ideology, and they have no idea that life exists beyond their tiny world." "What do you propose?" asked another delegate, a being of living crystal from the Synthesis Collective. "Simple," Velkith replied. "The Sol system falls within the region we are dividing today. I propose that the Dominion be granted authority over it, and in exchange, we will provide labor resources to any member of the Conclave who requires them." The meaning was clear to everyone in the room. Humans would become slaves, workers for the great civilizations of the galaxy. They would mine asteroids and build ships and serve their masters without ever understanding that they had once been free. "The Dominion makes a fair offer," said the Synthesis representative, "but the hegemony has also expressed interest in that sector." Yaravel stood, her compound eyes reflecting hundreds of tiny images of the chamber. "We have," she confirmed. "The humans breed quickly and require little maintenance. They would serve well in our agricultural colonies." The debate continued, each power arguing not about whether humanity should be enslaved, but about who would get the privilege of enslaving them to these ancient civilizations. Humans were nothing more than animals, useful tools to be owned and controlled. No one in the chamber considered asking the humans what they wanted. No one imagined that the humans might have an opinion worth hearing. The discussion had been going on for nearly an hour when the first alarm sounded. Every representative in the chamber stopped talking as warning lights began to flash along the walls. "What is happening?" Velkith demanded. Turning to the station's command staff, a small gray-skinned technician rushed to a console, her fingers dancing across the controls. "Ambassador, we are detecting a gravitational anomaly," she reported, her voice tight with confusion. "Something is approaching the station, but our sensors cannot identify it." "That is impossible," Yaravel declared. "This station has the most advanced detection systems in the galaxy. Nothing can approach without being seen." But even as she spoke, the anomaly grew stronger. Every ship in the area reported the same thing. Something massive was moving toward the station, something that their instruments could not see or identify. the representatives began to murmur among themselves. Old fears rising to the surface 3,000 years ago. The galaxy had nearly destroyed itself in the Shroud Wars. A conflict fought with cloaking technology so advanced that fleets could appear anywhere without warning. The Conclave had been formed in the aftermath of that war, and one of its first acts had been to ban all cloaking technology forever. Now something was approaching their most secure location, while completely invisible to their sensors. "Shields up," Velkith commanded, his confidence finally cracking. All weapons to ready status. The station's defensive systems hummed to life, but everyone in the chamber knew that they were facing the unknown. Then, directly in front of the station, space itself seemed to fold open. It was like watching reality tear apart at the seams. One moment, there was empty void, and the next moment there was a ship. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the size of any warship in the combined fleets of the Conclave. Its hull was black as the space between stars, drinking in light rather than reflecting it. The design was completely alien to every species present. All sharp angles and strange geometries that seemed to hurt the eyes, but it was the markings on the hull that made the blood of every delegate run cold. Painted across the bow of the ship, in every language known to the Conclave, was a single word that none of them had expected to. CARTH. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted orders into their communication devices, while guards rushed to defensive positions. Velth stared at the viewscreen, his forehands trembling as his mind tried to process what he was seeing. "That cannot be," he whispered. "The humans are primitive. They do not have faster than light travel. They do not have cloaking technology." But the evidence was right in front of him. A ship that should not exist, built by a species that should not have been capable of building it. High Commander Yaravel moved to stand beside him, her earlier amusement completely gone. "They have been listening," she said, her translator failing to hide the fear in her voice. "They know what we were planning," as if in answer to her words. The human ship's communication array came to life, a signal broadcast across every frequency, reaching every representative in the chamber and every ship in the area. A human voice spoke, calm and clear and completely unafraid. "This is the UES Prometheus, representing the United Earth Alliance." Every being in the chamber held their breath. "We understand you have been discussing the future of our species," the voice continued. "We believe we should have a voice in that discussion." Then, after a pause that seemed to last forever, the voice delivered its final message. "We request a seat at this table." And then, with words that would echo through galactic history, the human commander added one more sentence. "We will not ask twice." The silence in the chamber lasted for exactly 12 seconds before chaos erupted once more. Every delegate in the room began shouting at once, demanding answers that no one could provide. How had the humans built such a ship? How had they developed cloaking technology? How had they known about the Conclave and its plans? Ambassador Velkith gripped the edge of his podium with all four hands, his scales turning a pale shade of gray that indicated extreme stress. "Scan that ship," he ordered the station technicians. "I want to know everything about it. Construction materials, power signatures, weapon systems. Everything." The gray-skinned technician worked frantically at her console, but her face showed nothing but confusion. "Ambassador, our scans are not working properly," she reported. "The hull is made of some material we cannot identify, and it seems to be absorbing our sensor beams rather than reflecting them." "That is impossible," declared the representative from the Synthesis Collective. "Every material in the known universe has a measurable signature." "Every material we know of," Yaravel corrected, her compound eyes fixed on the view screen where the human ship hung motionless in space. "Clearly, the humans have discovered something we have not. Across the galaxy." The news spread at faster than light speeds within hours. Every government and every intelligence agency among the seven powers was scrambling to understand what had just happened on the Dominion homeworld. Analysts pulled up every scrap of data they had ever collected on humanity. They found records of a primitive species, barely capable of reaching their own moon, fighting among themselves over petty differences. They found assessments written by Dominion scouts that describe humans as clever animals, dangerous only to themselves. They found absolutely nothing that could explain the ship now floating in front of the Conclave station in the hegemony. Military commanders gathered in secure bunkers to discuss the implications. The cloaking technology alone should have taken them 5,000 years to develop, said one admiral. Her wings folded tight against her body in a gesture of distress. Our scientists spent 300 years trying to recreate it after the Shroud Wars. And they failed, another added. How long have the humans had faster than light travel? Asked a young officer. The room fell silent as the terrible truth sank in if the humans had somehow obtained FDL technology. They had kept it secret from the entire galaxy, and if they had kept that secret, what else were they hiding? The answer came from an unexpected source. A trader named Korath, who had operated in the Outer Rim territories for decades. He sent a message to Hegemony Intelligence, requesting payment for information about the humans. I have been to the edge of their space, his message read. I have heard the stories that other traders tell. There are things out there, near Sol System, that we do not understand. When interrogated, Korath revealed something that made his handlers go pale with fear. 5 years ago, I lost a cargo ship near the Sol System, he explained. My crew reported seeing lights in the void. Lights that moved too fast to be natural. Why did you not report this before? His interrogator demanded. I did. Korath replied with a shrug. Your people told me it was sensor ghosts and to stop wasting their time. Similar stories began to emerge from traders and smugglers across the outer territory, ships that had vanished without explanation. Near-human space-strange signals that were dismissed as interference warnings passed in whispered conversations among those who traveled the dark spaces. Between stars, do not wake the sleeping giant, the traders would say to each other. Now the galaxy understood what that phrase meant. Back at the Conclave station, the delegates finally found the courage to respond to the human transmission. This is Ambassador Velkith of the Dominion, he announced, his voice carefully controlled. We acknowledge your presence and your request. The response came immediately, delivered by the same calm human voice. Good. Then you will provide us with a delegation berth and full diplomatic status. Velkith exchanged glances with the other delegates. They had not agreed to anything yet. And this human was speaking as if everything had already been decided. There are procedures to be followed, Velkith replied, trying to regain some control of the situation. Membership in the Conclave requires. We are familiar with your procedures, the human interrupted. We have been watching your Conclave for quite some time. Those words sent a chill through every being in the chamber. How long? Yaravel demanded, stepping forward. How long have you been watching us? There was a pause, and when the human spoke again, there was something almost like amusement in the voice. 50 of your standard years ago, a Dominion scout ship entered our solar system. It was conducting a survey, determining whether Earth was suitable for, how did the report phrase it, quiet absorption. Velkith felt his heart skip a beat. He remembered that mission. He had authorized it himself when he was still a junior diplomat. That scout ship experienced a malfunction and crashed on our fourth planet. The human continued. Your people assumed it was destroyed in an asteroid collision. They were wrong. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. You captured the ship, the synthesis representative said. Not a question, but a statement of horrified realization. We did, the human confirmed. And from its wreckage, we learned several important things. First, We learned that we are not alone in the universe. Second, we learned that faster-than-light travel is possible. And third, we learned that the great civilizations of the galaxy had already decided our fate. The silence stretched on as each delegate imagined what it would feel like to discover that your entire species had been marked for slavery. You should have done better research on us. The human voice continued. You should have asked what humans do when we discover a threat. We do not hide. We do not surrender. We prepare. In 50 years, Yarvel breathed, her translator barely able to convey her shock. You developed FTL travel and cloaking technology in 50 years? Among other things, the human replied. High Commander Yarvel turned to the other delegates, speaking the words that everyone was thinking, but no one wanted to say. If they hid this one ship from us, she said slowly, if they built something this advanced in total secrecy, then we have to ask ourselves a very important question. She looked back at the view screen, at the impossible vessel that had changed everything. How many more ships are out there? The human voice came one final time, and this time there was no mistaking the steel beneath the calm words. That is an excellent question, High Commander. Perhaps you should spend some time considering the answer before you decide how to respond to our request. Then the communication channel went silent, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy to contemplate just how badly they had underestimated the sleeping giant of Earth. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the chaos unfolding on the alien station through the ship's advanced sensors. She could see every delegate scrambling, every guard taking position, every weapon system powering up in panic. It was exactly the reaction Earth had expected. Captain, said her first officer, Commander James Chun, the alien station has raised shields and is charging weapons. Should we respond? Vasquez shook her head slowly. No need, she replied. They will not fire. They are too scared and too confused. She turned away from the view screen and walked through the bridge, past dozens of crew members who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Prometheus represented everything humanity had accomplished in the past 50 years. Every sacrifice and every breakthrough. Looking at her ship, no one would believe it had been built by a species that had nearly destroyed itself. Before reaching the stars, Vasquez remembered the world she had grown up in. A world torn apart by war and climate disaster. She had been 15 years old when the alien ship crashed on Mars. And she remembered exactly where she was standing when the news reached Earth. Scientists had discovered wreckage that could not have come from any human spacecraft. The confirmation of alien life had changed everything. At first there had been celebration, the thrilling knowledge that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. Then the researchers had decoded the ship's databanks, and celebration turned to cold, hard terror. The records showed that Earth had been surveyed dozens of times over the past century. Reports described humans as a developing species with potential value as labor units. Projections indicated that direct intervention would be most efficient when conducted within the next 100 standard years. Humanity had learned that aliens were real, and in the same moment, they had learned that those aliens planned to enslave them. Vasquez had watched the global broadcasts as world leaders address their nations. She had seen enemies who had fought for generations suddenly set aside their differences. She had witnessed the birth of the United Earth Alliance, formed not from hope, but from fear. Fear is a powerful motivator, she said quietly to herself, remembering words her grandfather had spoken long ago. Commander Chun approached her, holding a data tablet. The delegates are trying to identify us, he reported. They have scanned our hall 17 times in the last hour. Let them scan. Vasquez replied. They will not find anything useful. Dr. Martinez made sure of that. Dr. Sofia Martinez had been the genius behind the Prometheus's stealth system. She had spent 20 years developing materials that could absorb sensor beams and mass power signatures. She had died 3 years before the ship's completion, working until her final breath to give humanity a fighting chance. The ship was her legacy, and the legacy of thousands of scientists and engineers and soldiers who had given everything to build it across the galaxy. Intelligence operatives from every major power were now digging into humanity's hidden history. They searched for any sign they might have missed, any clue that could explain how a primitive species had achieved the impossible. What they found disturbed them deeply. A hegemony analysts discovered records of a human probe that had been intercepted near their border. The probe had been destroyed and dismissed as debris, but a closer examination of the records revealed something strange. The probe had been traveling at velocities that should have been impossible for human technology. A Dominion investigator found reports from merchants who had encountered strange ships in the outer territories. The ships had been dark and silent, appearing briefly before vanishing again into the void. No one had paid attention at the time, because everyone knew humans were primitive. Everyone knew humans could not possibly have built such vessels. Spy embedded in a trading outpost on the rim sent a message to the Synthesis Collective. She had heard stories from smugglers, tales of entire stations that had gone dark after reporting contact with unknown ships. The official explanation had always been pirate activity or equipment failure. Now those explanations seemed far less convincing. Back on the Prometheus, Captain Vasquez ordered a data packet transmitted to the Conclave station. "What are we sending them?" Chun asked. "The truth," Vasquez answered. "They think we came here because we want power or territory. They need to understand our real motivation." The data packet contained intercepted communications from the past 50 years, messages between the various galactic powers discussing humanity's future. It showed Dominion officials laughing about how easy it would be to conquer Earth. It showed hegemony commanders arguing over how to divide human populations among their agricultural worlds. It showed the Synthesis Collective calculating the optimal timeline for human absorption. Every plan, every scheme, every casual conversation about enslaving 8 billion human beings had been recorded and preserved. Vasquez watched the alien delegates receive the transmission, watched their faces change as they realized what they were seeing. "You made a mistake," she said, opening a channel to the station. "When your scout ship crashed on Mars, you assumed we would never find it. You assumed we would never understand what it contained. You assumed we were nothing but animals waiting to be tamed." The chamber had gone completely silent, every delegate frozen in place. "We found your ship," Vasquez continued. "We decoded your plans, and we decided that we would not be victims." Ambassador Velketh finally found his voice, though it shook as he spoke. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Vasquez considered the question carefully before answering. "We want to survive," she said simply. "And when humans want to survive, we become very creative." She gestured to her first officer, who transmitted another file to the station. This one showed schematics and technical specifications, a glimpse of humanity's true capabilities. The aliens saw weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand supernova-level energies, and most terrifying of all, a fleet of ships hidden throughout the galaxy. "You made us afraid," Vasquez said, her voice hard as steel. "You should have studied what humans do when we are afraid." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We do not hide from our fears. We do not run from danger." Captain Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her reflection appearing in the view screen alongside the image of the panicking alien station. "We build." The hours that followed the human transmission were filled with desperate communication between the 7 powers. Ambassadors contacted their homeworlds, Military commanders held emergency meetings, and intelligence agencies worked through the night trying to verify the terrible things the humans had shown them. Ambassador Velketh stood in a private chamber, speaking via secure channel to the Dominion High Council. "This is an act of war," declared Supreme Leader Krath, his image flickering on the display. "They have threatened us with destruction. They have infiltrated our territory. They must be punished." "With respect, Supreme Leader," Velketh replied carefully, "we do not yet know the full extent of their capabilities." "We know enough," Krath interrupted, his scales flushing red with anger. "They have one ship. We have thousands. Order the 30 warships stationed near the Conclave to attack. Destroy this human vessel and send a message to their pathetic little planet." Velketh wanted to argue, but he knew better than to challenge the Supreme Leader directly. "As you command," he said, bowing his head. Within minutes, 30 Dominion warships began moving into attack formation around the Conclave station. Their weapons charged with enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble on the bridge of the Prometheus. Alarms began to sound. "Captain," reported the tactical officer, "the Dominion fleet is powering weapons and moving to intercept." Commander Chun turned to Vasquez with concern in his eyes. "Orders, Captain?" Elena Vasquez did not move, did not react, did not even look worried. "Hold position," she said calmly. "Maintain current power levels. Do not raise shields." Chun stared at her in disbelief. "Captain, those ships will be in weapons range in 4 minutes. If we do not, trust me." "Commander," Vasquez interrupted, her voice steady and sure, "we anticipated this exact scenario." She touched the control on her chair, opening a secure channel to Earth Command. "This is Prometheus Actual. Initiate protocol Sleeping Giant on 30 different worlds across Dominion space." Humans who had lived in secret for years received the signal they had been waiting for. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were scientists working in research facilities, translators embedded in diplomatic missions, engineers maintaining power stations, and servants moving silently through the halls of nobility. They had been placed carefully over decades, living among the aliens and gathering information while waiting for the day when they would be called to action. Now the day had arrived. In the capital city of the Dominion homeworld, a human woman named Sarah Cole sat in her small apartment, working as a data analyst for a minor government office. No one had ever suspected that she was anything other than what she appeared to be, a useful primitive hired to handle menial tasks. When the signal came, Sarah simply walked to her window and stood there, looking out at the city below. Then she activated a small transmitter hidden in her clothing and broadcast her location on an open frequency across Dominion space. Hundreds of other humans did the same thing in military bases and research centers and power stations, in the homes of generals and the offices of politicians. Human agents revealed themselves. They did not attack, they did not threaten, they simply made their presence known on the Dominion homeworld. Supreme Leader Krath received reports that made his scales turn white with shock. "There are humans in the Central War Ministry," an aide reported breathlessly. 3 of them have been working there for over a decade. "There is a human in the primary power distribution center," another aide added. "She has access to systems that could black out half the continent." "Supreme Leader," a third voice cut in, sounding close to panic, "there is a human in your palace. She has been serving as a cleaning worker for 8 years. Krath stared at the reports flooding his screen, unable to process what he was seeing. The humans had not just built one ship. They had been planning this moment for decades, placing their people in positions where they could cause maximum damage if needed, but they had not caused any damage. They had not made any threats. They had simply shown the Dominion exactly how vulnerable they truly were in space. The situation grew even more alarming. Sensors across the galaxy detected 4 more gravitational anomalies. identical to the one that had preceded the Prometheus's appearance. 4 more human ships uncloaked simultaneously, each one orbiting a different homeworld of the Conclave Powers a vessel, appeared above the Dominion capital. Another materialized near the hegemony's primary military station, a third ship uncloaked in orbit around the Synthesis Collective's neural hub. World the fourth appeared above the trading center of the Merchant Confederation. Each ship broadcast the same message: we are here. We have always been here. Choose wisely. In the conclave chamber, Ambassador Velkith watched his carefully planned attack fall apart before his eyes. The 30 Dominion warships slowed their advance, their commanders receiving frantic messages from home. Call them off, Yaravel said urgently, her usual composure completely gone. Velkith, you have to call them off now. Velkith stood frozen, caught between the orders of his supreme leader and the reality of what he was facing. Then a new communication came through from the Prometheus ambassador. Captain Vasquez said, her face appearing on the main screen. I hope this demonstration has been educational. Velkith found his voice, though it came out as little more than a whisper. What do you want? I told you what we want, Vasquez replied. A seat at the table. But perhaps I should add one more item to our request. She leaned forward, her dark eyes meeting his across the vast distance of space. An apology. Velkith thought about his supreme leader, about the Dominion's pride, about thousands of years of treating lesser species as property to be owned. Then he thought about the human agents standing in his government buildings, about the ships orbiting his homeworld, about the message humanity had delivered with perfect, terrifying clarity. If you attack us, we can hurt you in ways you cannot imagine, but we would rather not. The Dominion, Velkith said slowly, the words feeling strange in his mouth, withdraws its attack order on the bridge of the Prometheus. Captain Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. Humanity had learned the concept of deterrence through centuries of standing on the edge of self-destruction. They had taught that lesson to the stars. Thank you, Ambassador, she said. I believe we can now have a productive conversation about the future. 6 months had passed as the day the human ship appeared, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Conclave of 7 had become the Conclave of 8, with humanity holding a permanent seat at the table where once there had been empty space in the great chamber. Now stood a flag bearing the symbol of Earth, a blue sphere wrapped in olive branches. Surrounded by stars, Ambassador David Okonkwo represented humanity in the daily proceedings. A tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that could turn to steel when the situation demanded. He had been a diplomat for 40 years. First serving his nation, and then serving his entire species. Today, he sat in his designated chair and listened as the other ambassadors debated trade routes and territorial boundaries, just as they had done for thousands of years before. Humanity arrived, but everything was different now. The casual dismissal of lesser species had vanished from the chamber. The assumption that the powerful could do whatever they wished had been quietly set aside, and whenever a delegate suggested something that might harm a developing civilization, the others would glance toward the human section and remember what had happened to those who underestimated Earth across the galaxy. Researchers and scientists had become obsessed with understanding humanity. How had such a young species accomplished so much in such a short time? The answer they found frightened them more than any weapon or fleet. Humans did not specialize like other species. The Dominion had spent millennia perfecting biological engineering. The hegemony had focused their efforts on military technology. The Synthesis Collective had devoted themselves entirely to information processing. Each species had found their area of excellence and developed it to its peak. But humans did everything. At once, they built weapons while composing music. They explored space while painting pictures. They developed medicine while writing poetry. Their minds jumped from subject to subject, making connections that more focused species would never see. Hegemony researchers spent 3 years studying human history and summarized their findings in a single sentence. They advanced through chaos when humans faced a problem. They threw everything at it until something worked when they encountered an obstacle. They invented a dozen different ways around it when they were threatened with extinction. They did not accept their fate. They fought back with every tool they had. This was the secret that the galaxy had. Failed to understand humans were not dangerous because they were strong or advanced or numerous. They were dangerous because they refused to give up on the edge of human space. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in a memorial garden built to honor those who had made humanity's survival possible. She had retired from active service, her mission complete. But she found herself returning to this place. Often the garden contained thousands of names carved into black stone. Wall scientists who had worked themselves to death unlocking the secrets of alien technology, soldiers who had volunteered for missions they knew would never bring them home, ordinary citizens who had sacrificed their comfort and security so that future generations could be free. Vasquez traced her finger along one particular name. Sofia Martinez, the woman who had designed the stealth systems that made the Prometheus possible. We did it. Sofia, she whispered. We showed them what we are. A young officer approached her, hesitating before speaking. Captain Vasquez? I hope I am not disturbing you. Vasquez turned to face him, recognizing the uniform of an Earth Navy ensign. Not at all. What can I do for you? The ensign looked nervous, the way young people always looked when meeting someone they had read about in history classes. I wanted to ask you something, if that is acceptable. Ask. Were you afraid? The ensign said, when you uncloaked in front of all those alien ships, when you stood alone against the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, were you afraid? Vasquez considered the question for a long moment before answering. I was terrified, she admitted. Every human on that ship was terrified. We knew that if our plan failed, our species would be enslaved or destroyed. Then how did you do it? The ensign asked. How did you find the courage? Vasquez smiled, a sad and knowing expression that spoke of years carrying an impossible burden. That is the secret about humans, she said. We are always afraid. We are afraid of the dark and afraid of dying and afraid of what waits in the unknown. But we have learned to use our fear. She gestured to the memorial wall, to the thousands of names of people who had given everything. Fear is what drives us forward. It pushes us to build and create and discover. The aliens thought that making us afraid would make us surrender. Vasquez turned to look up at the sky, at the stars that humanity now traveled freely. They did not understand that fear is what makes us most dangerous, far across the galaxy, on a world whose name humans could not pronounce. A young alien student sat in a learning center, studying the events of the past year. Her teacher, an elderly being who had lived through the Shroud Wars, watched her read about the human appearance at the conclave. Teacher, the student asked, looking up from her display. I do not understand something. What troubles you, young one? The humans, the student said. Why did everyone panic when they arrived? They only had a few ships. They did not attack anyone. Why were all the great powers so frightened? The teacher was silent for a long time, considering how to answer, because of what those ships represented. She finally said, we looked at the humans and saw a species that had been told they would be slaves. We saw people who had been marked for destruction. And instead of accepting their fate, they worked in secret for 50 years to make themselves strong enough to challenge the entire galaxy. The student frowned, still not quite understanding, but they did not actually fight anyone. That is precisely why they were frightening. The teacher explained. They could have fought. They could have used their hidden fleet to start a war that would have killed trillions. Instead, they chose to talk. She leaned forward, meeting her students' eyes. The humans showed us that they could destroy us, and then they asked for peace. That combination of strength and restraint is rare in the universe. What does it mean? The student asked. The teacher sat back, reciting words that had become common wisdom throughout the conclave since humanity's arrival. It means we should be very glad that the humans want to be our friends. And it means we should never, ever give them a reason to change their minds. She looked toward the window, toward the stars where human ships now traveled alongside those of the ancient powers. Let sleeping humans lie, she said softly, repeating the proverb that had spread across 1,000 worlds. For when they wake, they move mountains.